Welcome to Lessons from a Podcaster, a show where we interview podcasters from all around the world and ask them to share their tips, insights, stories, and everything you need to know to grow your own podcast. This show is brought to you by Podsqueeze, the essential tool for any podcaster that wants to take their show to the next level. Let's get started with our host, Tiago.
What's up, E? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. Plus, I'm you guys' biggest fan. So this is a bucket list moment for me.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. A little bird told me that once you spent 12 hours recording one episode. Tell me about that.
I launched my first podcast in 2017. In my defense, there was not a lot of information about podcasting. And everyone that I was listening, Gary Vee, I was listening to the Skinny Confidential, and they made it look so seamless. So I bought whatever mic I could find that picked up all the noise from the room, and then I tried to figure out Audacity, and tried to do noise reduction, look in tutorials. It was horrible. I didn't sleep because I had to work.
Oh no.
And I said never again. But there's something about podcasting that, kept me hooked from those horrible 12 hours.
Even though it had a rocky start, now it's kind of your life, right?
Those are the best relationships.
Yeah. Why did you think? So, what do you think was the problem? Were you like trying to get perfect? Is that something that you're very perfectionist? You wanted to do something perfect, or was it just like the equipment that wasn't working with you?
I think I didn't know what I was doing. I think I was not prepared to listen to my own voice and
Okay.
criticize my own voice. Right now, I'm way more permissive and I don't judge my voice. But up to that point, I had never heard my own voice in recording. So I tried to remove all mistakes. I tried to reduce everything, make it sound like the podcast I was listening. I think comparing myself to other big podcasts that were being recorded at a studio was a huge mistake because I did not have those recording conditions. And I didn't know that your recording is more important than your post-production. Like your post-production there's so much you can do. If you don't have good audio that you recorded with, you can apply all the tricks in the toolbox, but it's not gonna work. So I think comparison, not knowing, and just not having the resources, because podcasting at that time was not what it is right now. There are so many tools.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's much easier now to start. Even now, when you have like poor audio, you can use what is like Adobe tool or something. You just upload it there and uses AI and makes the audio like almost studio perfect, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's and even if you if you really are starting out, you could record with GarageBand, which is pretty decent, and then Buzzsprout, they have their Magic editor, so they
Okay.
do have great tools.
Yeah. It's I guess it's a bit easier than Audacity, right? Audacity is like the classic. Everyone uses it, but well, it's free, but I guess not the ideal thing to edit audio and doing all of that. So nowadays, what would be if someone was starting out, right? And they didn't have a lot of they were in the budgets. What would be your recommendation for them to have good audio? What should they invest on?
I think you need to invest in a good microphone. And this is controversial because everyone tells you just start, use your AirPods. And if you want to do it just to do it, and that's just a dream that you have and you want to put it out there, sure. But if you are taking this seriously, I would invest at least $130. There are really great options. For $130, you could either get the ones that plug in directly to the computer or get an audio interface. um those could be There are ones about $100, and maybe you don't have the equipment, and I understand, or the finances, but maybe get it
Yeah.
in a Facebook Marketplace. Try to find options,
Secondhand,
because
yeah.
that's going to make your life so much more easier, and it's also going to make the experience for the person who's listening better. So for sure, get a good microphone. I was gonna
Yeah.
name brands. Should I name brands? I'm gonna
Yeah,
name
sure.
brands. The Yeti microphone. I I don't want to see you. If you really want to take it seriously, I don't think Yeti is the way to go anymore, even though there are great podcasters recording on the Yeti bike, but I think there are better options. So get
What
a
is
good
the better
microphone.
option?
Well, I have Roadcaster everything, so I'm their fan.
Okay.
That's more expensive, but they are a great brand. So
Hmm.
anything that you can get with them,
Road.
it's great. Also, Buzzsprout, they have a guide if you are just starting out with great recommendations. So if you are just starting out, go to for in terms of what the process looks like. So it's more production, not strategic, but for production, go to Buzzsprout. They have a free guide how to start a podcast, and they have links for everything for different price points, and it's pretty good.
Perfect. I think it's always good to have like a starting point, and you're absolutely right. I think audio is really important. When I started podcasting with Gimlet Media, I don't know if you know, but it's kind of uh, the guy that founded it used to work for NPR, and the quality was so good. And I was even though if you have like you can have all the top notch equipment, but it's the experience also that counts. So yeah, start with a good mic, but I would say as well, don't put the standards to the professionals, right? It will
It's
take a
true.
while to get there.
But that's what
um,
you need, because if you have a good mic, then
mhm,
everything else is super easy, because you can then just do a quick audio cleanup. Then you use Podsqueeze for your show notes and
mhm,
all your marketing needs. Like,
mhm.
it gets so much easier if you just have a good foundation. So even that's an investment in your future.
Yeah, totally. Tell us about your podcast in 30 seconds. If you have to pitch it, how would that look like?
I would say Creator to Leader is my podcast. And you know how many entrepreneurs are struggling to be seen online and stand out. And we hear things like the market is saturated. The thing is that they are creating content, they are showing up as creators, they're not showing up as leaders in their industry through their
Mhm,
content that they're creating. So the Creator to Leader podcast helps them solve this problem, helping them with their messaging, create better content, and what it means to actually show up as a leader online, not
mhm,
just a creator, just that mentality and that self leadership aspect.
mhm. And do you remember your first episode and like why you decided to start this project?
I My first episode was on the meaning of leadership
Hmm.
and what it means and how we can take that to the online space, because we think of leadership in management and companies, but we actually, I believe deeply that we are made with purpose and we are made to lead people and to build each other up. And
Hmm.
when you see yourself in that way, with that responsibility, everything changes. And
Hmm.
I had this is my third podcast. So my first podcast was in Spanish, my second podcast was in English, and that one didn't work out. And I
Okay.
was so frustrated. I kept launching amazing episodes, what they say, provide value and people will
Hmm.
come. And I said maybe this is not for me. So I just focused on being a podcast producer and growing everyone's podcast. So I was doubling everyone's audiences, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to be the person behind the scenes, never in
Yeah.
front of the mic. That's fine. And then last year something changed. I think I was tired. I was thinking I have really a lot of information, and I think I have a unique perspective on what it means to be a leader in the online space and standing out when you have a purpose, and I'm going to use my voice for that. So my
Hmm.
first episode was exploring the topic of leadership, how to me I related a lot with art. I shared a lot about Seth Godin. He has an
Hmm.
amazing book where he talks about that artists and entrepreneurs, we create. That's our
Right.
purpose. We create. We find problems in the market, in the world, and we solve them. Artists, with whatever medium they want, we create a product in the marketplace. But that's the heart of an entrepreneur. So that's the heart of a leader at the end of the day.
Hmm.
So, it was amazing. It was a great, third time's the charm story.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was great.
I'm curious to know because it's the first time that I'm talking with someone that made a podcast in a different language, or in your case, in both languages. Um, I'm Portuguese. I haven't done anything in Portuguese, only in English. Uh, how is what is the biggest difference? From having a podcast. I know that the Spanish market is huge, by the way, as well. There's of course, a lot of speakers, and what is the biggest difference from doing a podcast in Spanish and another one in English?
I think the market and how much the market understands. The market in Spanish, in my experience, they really like the visual component to
Hmm.
podcasts. I've
Okay.
noticed that the marketing in English is more forgiving. If you don't have a visual component, they are great with just audio. By the time I launched, it was so new in Latin America. I had to make graphics explaining what a podcast was,
Hmm.
and I shared my vision at the time with people in my life that were from Latin
Yeah.
America, and they didn't take it seriously. But I was seeing all these people building businesses through podcasts in English.
Right.
That was number one, and then number two, I as I'm an immigrant and I came here
Hmm.
by myself, and people supported me along the way. But I think there's this idea that a lot of immigrants have, that if they don't have someone to vouch for you, a grandfather to help you, you cannot make it. You need to
Hmm.
be limited to speaking your own language, because you cannot speak a different language in a different market, because it's going to
Yeah.
be hard. So part of the reason I was editing 12 hours, if I'm being honest, that
Hmm.
was my first episode for my first podcast. For the second one, it was horrible as well. And it was
Hmm.
my first time in English, and I made so many mistakes.
Okay.
So many mistakes. It was awful. And
Hmm.
now I'm glad, because even the fluidity I have wouldn't have been possible if I had not spent two
Yeah.
years editing and making mistakes. So I think is the listening habits is a big
Yeah.
difference. But I think right now the Hispanic market is way more aware of podcasting. Maybe at some point I would do a podcast in Spanish again,
Yeah.
because
You
I feel
should.
like it is that
Yeah.
excitement for podcasts that maybe we had in the US like 2 years ago.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
Latin America now.
What I hear is that industry, so the US is maybe, yeah, 3 to 5 years ahead of other markets. From our experience, the second biggest market is either Spanish or French speaking language. But it's funny because I do relate to that. Most of my life is in English. Well, I still I live in Portugal, but my clients, my business, everything is in English. And I never actually, I know that my English is not perfect, but I never really thought too much about it. But now, especially because most of the people I interview are in the US, I don't feel that it keeps me grounded. I don't feel that it's a barrier, but maybe it is. I don't know. It's something that I don't think about it too often. But do you think it can be a barrier for someone that is not like fully native? Do you think people will hear your accent and be like, yeah, this is not American, so and the podcast won't do as well as a podcast that is spoken by an American accent?
Now looking back, I think it was my own BS. If
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being honest, I do think there is some of that, because when I was in the corporate world,
Mm-hmm.
I did experience some people just not taking me as seriously because of my accent. Also,
Mm-hmm.
Latinas, we are way more colorful. We
Mm-hmm.
are, humor is big for our culture. So these
Mm-hmm.
cultural differences for some Americans were difficult to manage. But now, I think it's such a mindset shift. Now I think that it's part of the reason people are attracted to my content, because it is different, because I offer
Yeah.
the perspective of having two cultures living within me. And maybe, I don't know if as a woman, I
Mm-hmm.
am more, sometimes I get more self-conscious and think that people are judging me in the way that I am. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe, it's like, if I'm judging myself, of course I'm going to be thinking that everyone is, versus just going for it.
Yeah,
and
it's good.
and
Yeah.
if it is what it is. It is
Yeah.
my voice, and the voice is needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great realization. Like, I also thought about that recently. That like we tend to assume that others are thinking in a certain way about ourselves, but that assumption comes from us, right? So
Yes.
we are thinking about ourselves in that way, right? Most of the
Yes.
times. So I don't know, for me, and if we can give some encouragement for people that are non-native, I don't know. I just chat with everyone, Americans, English, from also non-natives, and I've never seen any difference, or anyone looking me sideways and saying like, "Hey, you don't understand me" or something. So,
That's why I love the
uh,
entrepreneurial world,
yeah,
because my clients, the people I've worked with, they have this appreciation for, I love your brain and your values,
yeah,
and your accent is not going to be a challenge unless you
hmm
cannot communicate, like literally I cannot
oh
understand
yeah,
you.
of course,
But
yeah, yeah,
if
yeah,
not,
totally. Hmm
it's not a problem.
hmm So it's more about the content, more about the message one is
Yeah,
trying to express.
also being clear, because some people have great content but they cannot deliver it
Hmm
succinctly. They take, I hear episode podcasts that are half-hour episodes, and by minute 18 they start going into the topic.
mm
So, you can
Yeah.
have perfect accent, perfect knowledge, but then you don't deliver the message in a way that's engaging. You're telling me for 10 minutes about your weekend. And again, if you're a lifestyle brand, maybe it makes sense, but for the most part, if you want to grow your audience, just give people what they came for.
So how should one structure their episode so that they are, they go straight to the point and they don't lose people along the way?
Ooh, I actually have a formula for this.
Perfect.
So, first, I like to do some reasoning as of why I'm doing this episode.
Mm,
So, either I saw this in a comment, I read this in a book. Why is this important right now? Don't spend 10 minutes here. A few words is enough. Then I like to go into connection.
mm,
Connection is telling a personal story. You don't have to share your whole life story, but something that it applies to you. Sometimes the introduction and the connection can be one. If you had such a strong moment personally that you want to share, but for the most part, I like to say, let's say it's an episode about podcasting. I saw this trend report about podcasting, and I saw three trends, and I don't agree with all of them.
mhm.
And I used to live my life with trends, and then you go into your story just to connect with people. Again, very quickly, direct. I really want people to write the story down so you don't get too extended or into
Okay.
details that don't really matter. And then
Mhm,
go into, so then I understood how to interpret the reports. I'm gonna do the work for you. And these are the things I agree with. That's when you go into your insights.
mm.
You go into your insights, bullet points, teach. This is a teaching moment. If this is a type of podcast you have, if you have a
Right.
podcast where you are interviewing people, or is more
That's a different
comedy,
format.
it's different. But if this is a podcast you're doing solo, then you recap quickly what you said. So to
Mhm.
recap, one, two, three. Also, when you do this, you can take this clip and take it for your social media, because it's gonna be super short,
Yeah.
condensed, and then leave a CTA. If you have a CTA that's downloading a if you're doing something that's timely, I like
Mhm.
to do the CTA
What is
before
a
I get
CTA?
started. CTA is call to action.
Mm.
So if you are just saying join our newsletter, it's general, you can do it in the end. But if you are doing something special, let's say you are doing a master class on how to leverage your show notes for visibility in press, right? That's
Mhm.
very timely. So you want to do that at the top of the episode. Don't wait. A lot of people I see, they wait until the middle to insert, or until the end. You are losing half of people, because from everything I've
Ah.
seen with my clients, most people drop off about at least 50%
Okay.
mark of the episode.
Yeah.
So if you need people to do something, say in the beginning.
In the
And
beginning.
then that's when you record your full episode. Some people do intro hooks where you just
Mhm.
start the
Yeah.
episode with, today we're going to talk about XYZ. I personally do it. Some people take clips from the interview that were impactful
Yeah.
and put in them in the beginning. My thing with that is that if you are not a very strong speaker, you are not always going to have those impactful 20-second
Right.
quotes.
Mhm.
Or if your guest takes a very long time to get to a point, which I've seen, you're not going to have the quote. So then you're going to have to be picking little pieces here and there. It's going to be a hassle. I personally prefer to just give you an intro hook where I start with a question, relatable. Today we're gonna do this, this, and that. I'm gonna give you this, and stay till the end.
Hmm. So, do you think that people should uh, write down all the structure for every episode? So before starting, they'll be like, okay, this is my hook. This is what I show, what I've learned. This is my insights. They should like at least maybe not a script, but at least kind of lay out the interview or not the interview, the episode.
100%. I
Okay.
know it takes time,
Damn.
and some people,
I don't
maybe
do this.
maybe if you've been a speaker or a teacher for 5 years and you are
Yeah.
very good at being clear to the point, maybe you don't need to. But for most of us,
Hmm.
I do recommend that we do it, because what happens is that if you're not doing that, you are gonna it happened to me with my previous podcast a lot. I would start talking about something and I would end at a different place.
Oh yeah.
And I would say, today we're talking about how to grow your podcast. And then at the end, I'm giving you top ideas on how to title your episodes.
Hmm.
So that's why
And that's
and
not good.
people lose interest.
Yeah, then you lose people. Yeah, this makes total sense.
Yeah.
Now tell
So,
me about like you mentioned that the insights could be transformed into clips. Yeah, and I think that's a great bridge to how do you repurpose the content, and how do you take the content and then like put it into social media? What works, what doesn't work? Tell us everything.
well, we haven't talked about it, and I promise you didn't tell me to say this, but I've been talking about Podsqueeze in all my podcasts, because that
Oh, thank
really
you.
took about 3 hours of post production and promotion time for me. I have all my clients on it, so biggest
Wow.
fan, and I think it works because I upload my audio. I
Hmm.
have I don't use the regular show notes. I have my prompt, which is something I love. I have my prompt. I use it with all my clients, with myself, because you can fine tune your results.
Hmm.
That's my saved prompt. So I do that. Doing the show notes takes me 5 minutes from the moment I have them to the moment they are posted on Buzzsprout. Then there's another feature that I recommend called bullet points. So the
Hmm.
bullet points are the interesting things you talked about. So those are content ideas. Because what happens is that many people start talking about the podcast too directly. And if you feel like a walking advertisement for your podcast,
Right.
so when you talk indirectly about your podcast, meaning you talk about a topic that you discuss on your podcast, but the post in it
Ah.
of itself is not about the podcast, it's about the topic. So you can either take a clip, or you can just say something because you already have your ideas, your bullet points. The blog post, very, very good. I do recommend having your podcast on your website, if you have a website, of course. If not, with time, but having
Hmm.
that blog post and then embedding your feed onto the blog post. Because when many people, podcasting is not natural at SEO friendly platform, SEO,
Yeah.
search engine optimization, meaning there are ways to hack with titling and show descriptions, but it's not like YouTube. It is not.
Hmm.
If you're listening, when you look for something on YouTube, your video shows up on the right, and it doesn't matter how many views you've had. If it's relevant, you're going to be recommended. You can
Hmm.
blow up with just one video. The video keeps getting recommended. It doesn't happen that way with podcasting.
No.
That's
Hmm.
why I recommend that you put it on your blog, so that starts building the SEO on Google, and that gives more longevity
Hmm.
to your content. So the blog post feature is amazing. Um, the title feature, I think it's very important too, because you want to use words that are problem oriented. What is the
Hmm.
problem that you're solving? So I love the title feature. Sometimes I do fine
Yeah.
tune my results with
Hmm.
speak from the problem. So because sometimes I have clients, let's say you're a financial coach,
Yeah.
and you say, oh, I want to talk about the different type of savings account you need. But then my question is always, why would a person be interested in having a savings, like different types of savings account, unless that person is a financial pro? Then if you
Right.
tell me, how can you maximize your income by having multiple accounts? Oh, okay, now I see the benefit
Ah.
that I have.
And
So
that everything can change with the title then, right? Like, because that's
Yes.
the first contact that people have. So you need to think how to attract, the most people. And if you are too technical, then you won't attract everyone. You will only attract maybe a percentage of people that would be interested,
Yes.
right?
One of my most popular episodes is how to sell without being salesy.
Hmm.
And the actual episode is about the difference between empathy and sympathy. That's something I wanted to talk about. It's more of a philosophical concept. But if I title my episode, The Difference Between Empathy and Sympathy, no one's going to listen to it. Why
Yeah.
do I care? The thing is that you need that concept so you don't feel salesy. And then I go into the episode,
Mm,
why do you need that? But then the problem I'm solving is you are not going to feel salesy.
right. But
Not,
it's still important that the title is connected with the content that you're sharing, right? So
yeah,
and I think you mentioned that too, right? So you cannot try to be clickbaity and do something and then talking about something completely different, because then you'll also lose your listeners, and you lose trust as well, right?
absolutely. But that's why you need to have your outline. So you are,
Hmm.
people are going to like this
Yeah.
and you stay in integrity.
Now, let me ask you something, which is about expectations. Now, someone is starting their podcast either to grow their personal brand or because they want to make that their business. What should they expect? Should they expect immediate growth? How long does it take? How do I know that it's working or not working for me? You know?
Oh, that's a great question. Um,
It's a hard one,
I'm going to
right?
start with
It's
the
a,
last one. How do you know if it's
hmm
working or not? You need
hmm
to know what you want out of the podcast. And you need to be very, very honest. Don't try to give a socially acceptable answer. Oh, I just want to impact more lives. Because if
Right.
your answer is, I just want to impact more lives, and you have 5 listeners every week, that's amazing. That's 5 people
hmm
that are listening to you. Your objective is fulfilled. But I'm guessing that you're not going to be as happy if
hmm
you have five listeners every week and you don't grow from there. So
Yeah.
what is it that you want to do? The two main reasons I see for people having a podcast is to grow an audience or to nurture
hmm
an existing audience. So if you want to nurture an existing audience, is people that are already in your community, they are in your email list, and then you have the podcast, and then on the podcast you maybe go more personal, you share more
hmm
interviews, you do more behind the scenes. You
hmm
are nurturing people that are already with you. A lot of people though, they want to grow their audience, their expertise, they want to be more visible through their podcast. So in
Right.
that way, the number of downloads is going to be important. But then the expectations question is very, very crucial.
hmm
What can you expect? I think you need to expect for the first year to just do the podcast. That needs to be your measure of success. And it
So
is
to be
frustrating.
consistent and
Yes,
always okay, not
absolutely.
giving up is already a win.
Yeah, because look, I launched my podcast and my podcast ranked top 37 on Apple Podcasts, top 3 globally immediately. And then
Amazing.
a few months ago, the iOS changed
Hmm.
their algorithm. I don't know what's the
Yeah.
correct word. And then now, in an Apple podcast, when someone subscribes to you, they get automatic downloads of your episodes. But now they
Ah.
changed it. So if someone hasn't listened to 5 episodes, or if they're running low on storage, your episode will not be downloaded. So I had all of these
Ah.
people who saw a huge dip in downloads. So
Yeah.
downloads are
That
changing a
explains
lot.
it. Now I
Yeah.
know. Okay.
Yeah, if you saw a huge dip, it wasn't you. It was Apple
Okay.
messing
Well, it
with
was a
you.
little bit me, right? Because people are not listening enough, I guess.
Yeah, but there's so many other factors
Hmm.
with than just, are people listening to this. Um I've noticed that once you get to 1,000 downloads, your first 1,000 downloads, that's a great first milestone. It's a very ambitious. Um
You mean 1,000 downloads per episode or in total?
Total.
Okay.
Yeah, like I feel
That's
like
not that hard, is it?
it is not hard, but if you don't
Hmm.
have zero audience, it might be
Yeah.
more challenging. But I feel like in 6 months you can get there. Like anyone
Okay.
can get there if they really stay consistent. Maybe sooner, but I think your first 1,000 downloads should be celebrated. Um,
Hmm.
if unless you're a huge you have a 1,500,000 people community. If you only have a
Mhm.
thousand, then I'm like, there's a
Okay.
problem with the
Yeah.
podcast. But for the most part, I would say 1,000 downloads is a great milestone. um
In the first 6 months, 1,000 downloads is it's good.
yes, that's a good.
If you're starting
Yeah.
without, from zero, cold start without an audience.
Yes, but you need to put yourself out there. That's another thing. You cannot just record your podcast and hope that the gods of the algorithms will
Hmm.
push it for you. Or just record your podcast or upload a story. Hey guys, new episodes
Yeah.
out, link in my bio.
Yeah.
Like, that's not doing anything. You
Ah,
need
okay.
to go above and beyond. When I launched my podcast, I did a whole event as if I was launching a new
Hmm.
Quentin Tarantino movie. I
Okay.
I did a visual trailer. Like, I really went out there. So I had people saying, "What did you do to land, top in the top?" And I'm like, "I worked freaking hard."
Yeah.
I messaged people one on one. "Hey,
Hmm.
I launched my podcast today. Would you mind going?" Just having that communication and
Very
not
interesting.
being,
Okay.
don't get it attached to your personal fulfillment. Like, you're not doing a podcast to have people validate you if you are good at your job or if you are good at your expertise. It doesn't mean
Hmm.
anything. And I can't take it from me, because I made it mean something. My second podcast, where people were not listening, and I said, maybe I'm not good. I'm not meant to do
Hmm.
this. Now looking back, I'm like, no, it just wasn't clear. I didn't have a clear messaging. Like, there were so many problems. So why did I make it mean something about myself? Now with this
Yeah.
podcast, I look at the numbers, I look at downloads. When are people listening? What are the topics? I sometimes do tests. I'm gonna make a very long title to see if this performs well. I
Hmm.
just test things, and if something doesn't work, okay, I know for next time. What
Hmm.
what are good performers? Just having that neutrality in your mind throughout the whole process.
That's really important. I think not for everything in life, to be honest. Not only
Yeah.
podcasting, for business, for personal. Uh, to try to be pragmatic and think about things on, okay, what am I doing wrong, and not I am wrong. I am not cut for this or something. So I think that's great. Great advice. And we have learned a lot from you, which is great. As a last question, and I guess it's a more philosophical one, but I would love to hear your answer. How did podcasting change your life?
The first thing that came to mind is that it showed me that my voice matters.
Mm,
And that's such an empowering feeling, knowing that your voice and your opinions matter, and you can take ownership of your expertise and what you know and what you're passionate about. Even if it's comic books, your voice can give
yeah.
life to that passion that you have. So, and
uh,
this is not being strategic or anything. I'm talking about just having a podcast about things that you love and you're passionate about and you want to share with the world. I believe that it just gives you that leadership automatically and confidence,
yeah.
because you are putting yourself out there. So for me, I think that as an immigrant, having a podcast is a constant reminder that my voice matters. And working with so many other people, I see the passion that they have. And I'm just like, I don't think there's any other more intimate medium like than being
Oh
on
yeah.
someone's ear, in someone's brain.
Totally.
That's a level of access that I am honored to have, and I don't
Hmm.
take it for granted.
I think that's a great answer. That's a great answer. Your voice matters. I think that's a great way to end this one. Tell us again the name of your show, and where can we find you?
Sure. The show is called Creator to Leader. If you want to take space in your industry, be seen as a leader that creates transformation, that goes first, that shows what's possible, and it's not just creating without any specific goal, this is going to be the podcast for you. You can find it on every platform. Go to creatortheleader.com, and you can find me on my personal Instagram is at eugenia.wu. And yes, my mom didn't use a very international name when she named me. That's EUGENIA dot WOO. That's at eugenia.wu. And send me a message if you have any questions on growing your podcast strategically. I would love to support you.
Perfect. And like always, the links will be in the show notes of these episodes. Thank you very much, E, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you, Tiago. This was a pleasure.
This podcast is brought to you by Podsqueeze, an essential tool for podcasters that creates show notes, timestamps, clips, and more. Visit podsqueeze.com and use the code PODCASTER for 20% discount in the first 3 months. We release a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. See you in the next episode of Lessons from a Podcaster.